To start our conference today, and as a lead into our first panel conversation about STEM education and the importance of public-private partnerships in our public school system, TechniCLE Speaking is honored to welcome Mr. Frank Sullivan to our podium. Mr. Sullivan is the longtime chairman and CEO of RPM International. RPM's operating companies manufacture and market high-performance coatings and sealants that are sold in over 170 companies and territories around the world, and they employ over 13,000 people. In short, Mr. Sullivan operates a remarkable Northeast Ohio company. Today, however, we welcome Mr. Sullivan to discuss his laudable efforts in the area of public education, and in particular, his instrumental role in the creation of the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine. Since its inception, CSSM has been designated academically excellent by the state of Ohio and has been named one of America's best high schools by U.S. News and World Report, which is a tremendous accomplishment. CSSM is a shining example of the power of leveraging community assets and expertise to improve our public education system. So please join me in welcoming Mr. Frank Sullivan.
I appreciate the opportunity to participate in today's TechniCLE Speaking program. I've been asked to comment on the importance of public-private partnerships in public education, and I apologize for the formal nature of reading a script. About a week ago, I sat down with the 5 bullet points that I really wanted to cover, pulled out my iPhone, turned on my stopwatch, and 20 minutes later, I wasn't through half of them, and decided to get this done in 10 minutes, I better script it. So I'd like to hit 3 points before our panel convenes. First of all, public-private partnerships have been part of the fabric of education at all levels throughout the history of the United States, from church-based schooling at the elementary level to the establishment of the country's first private universities. Still relevant and evidenced today by the parochial school education in Cleveland. 7 years ago, I had the opportunity to visit Urban Community School and Metro Catholic School with Mayor Jackson to introduce him to 1,000 young students, the majority of whom are non-Catholic, poverty-level minority students in Cleveland. To the Industrial Revolution era company towns and their company-funded and supported schools. Something that today looks like the Denver School of Technology, started and built by Forest City in partnership with the Denver Public Schools as part of Forest City's Stapleton Airport Real Estate Development Project, to the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine that I've been involved with since its inception a little more than a decade ago. Public-private partnerships have been and will continue to be vital to how we provide education in the United States. The debate today, as always, is the proper and most effective role of each public and private sector player in delivering quality education, which leads me to point number 2, the importance of shared authority and responsibility. In studying how to create a successful public-private partnership for public high school education, I became aware of too many examples of private sector players armed with enthusiasm, a genuine desire to improve education, and the ability to raise money, who were over time, with a lack of valued input on challenges or problems, and most often with arrangements where the friends or the board of a particular school didn't even have control over how or where the money they raised was used. So in almost every instance, the private side of these partnerships understandably withered. This was expressed to me in a different way by Joanne DeMarco, then head of the Cleveland Teachers Union, and one of the individuals instrumental in establishing the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine. In the early years before the school was actually started, we worked on governance issues and an exciting curriculum. I noticed Joanne rolling her eyes, and I asked Joanne, "What's the matter?" And she said to me, "I cannot count the times in her career that she's seen enthusiastic business people try to get engaged in education, and after a few years, when they find out how truly hard it is, and that the duties and responsibilities of their job take them away, their lack of persistence leads to frustration, and they simply leave." So one of the principal reasons that the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine has been so successful, as you heard, one of the top performing schools in Ohio and recognized nationally, is that it has its own board of trustees that has real authority through a memorandum of understanding negotiated with the Cleveland School District and the Cleveland Teachers Union that allows the board to hire and fire the principal, provide input on school curriculum, and has total control of the money it raises on behalf of the school to direct to those areas the board, in partnership with the school principal, deems appropriate. At the time, this was unique governance structure to any public school in the United States. As you might imagine, this was a difficult issue to negotiate, but we were successful for one because the private sector players at the table were the Cleveland Clinic, University Hospital, Case Medical School, the Cleveland Foundation, and the Greater Cleveland Partnership. So for starters, you need serious private sector players at the table who bring more than a promise of money and enthusiasm. They need to bring real expertise relevant to a particular school's theme, curriculum, or mission. Secondly, and at the time, mostly unbeknownst to my private sector partners, I pushed this issue particularly hard, not to wrestle control from the Cleveland School District or the teachers union, but to provide a hook to keep private sector players at the table. With real authority comes real responsibility that you cannot walk away from. So for a successful public-private partnership in public education, you need private sector players with expertise or passion around the theme, curriculum, or mission of a particular school, and you must have shared real authority and the related responsibility, particularly when things get difficult, so that the educational professionals cannot, in frustration, dismiss or ignore the input of private sector partners, and the private sector partners cannot, in frustration, throw their hands up and walk away. These points also hint at my third and final point, the proper unit or level of measuring performance and success and understanding the importance of culture in a successful school outcome. One of the catalysts for starting the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine was the donor fatigue growing rapidly at the Cleveland Foundation, where I was a trustee, and Cleveland Tomorrow, and now the Greater Cleveland Partnership, of investing greater and greater amounts of money into the Cleveland Municipal School District at the top for various and different programs, and not seeing any improvement or understanding why this investment was not having a positive effect. One of the most critical decisions the leaders of any organization makes is understanding how and where to effectively measure performance and success. So for instance, investors in RPM most often make their decisions to invest on a consolidated financial result of a $5 billion global operation. For regulatory financial reporting purposes, we actually break that $5 billion down into three segments: industrial, consumer, and specialty, thus providing interested investors in a three-way slice of our results and performance. In reality, at RPM, we measure success at each one of our 50 independent business units, each one of which is led by a P&L responsible leader, typically called an operating company president. So with an understanding of the frustration of private sector donors into Cleveland Public Schools and this business background I just described, I became a strong advocate at the Cleveland Foundation and the GCP of stopping financial support to the district level and instead investing directly into schools where we could actually see results and understand better if our investment was having the desired impact, and if not, why not? It is this type of private sector perspective that can make people think differently about improving public education. Until very recently, in Ohio, we have spent a lot of time measuring success at the district level. We have also spent a fair amount of time assessing through an increasing number of tests the performance metrics of individual students. I think as a community, we have come to believe that the best way to measure success of education is by the individual school performance. This brings me to the all-important and much talked about in recent years notion of culture. One of the hot topics in business school discussions today is the notion that culture is everything. Our company has the privilege of doing leadership programs every year in partnership with the U.S. Army War College based upon a staff ride of the Gettysburg battlefield. Over a decade, I've learned a common phrase within the U.S. Army that is certainly relevant to this discussion on education. Culture eats strategy for lunch every day. Another reason why the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine has been so successful is that we are allowed to start this school literally with a single incoming freshman class and build the school year by year, thereby creating a successful culture from scratch. Without spending a lot of time on the unique aspects of the culture of the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine, I can tell you that the combination of our students, our teachers, our parents, the physical setting, and most certainly the business unit leader, in this case Principal Ed Weber, have created a culture of remarkable success. Unfortunately, in the past, measurements done at the micro level of students and the macro level of districts in conjunction with how we address budget changes. In the last Cleveland Municipal School District cutbacks came along, they were applied pretty much equally across all schools, such that a school like this with remarkable success saw 25% of its teaching ranks cut. Nowhere else in society up until recently, in relationship to Cleveland schools, would we have brought an across-the-board cut to an organizational unit performing like this. A big part of this thinking has been part of the formation of the Cleveland Plan that was enacted with the strong advocacy of Mayor Jackson, the support of Governor Kasich, and the passage by the Ohio legislature specific to Cleveland municipal schools. So with that, I'll just summarize the key points that I have learned over the last decade, which is the fact that public-private partnerships in education have been around the United States for hundreds of years and will continue to be so, that the public-private partnerships will work when you get the balance right between clearly shared authority and responsibility, that culture and measuring the right unit of performance, in this case the school building, not the district and not the individual student necessarily, and lastly, that empowering and focusing on leaders at the right level, in this case principals, have made all the difference and are one of the key elements of the improvement that we're finally seeing in our education system in the city of Cleveland. Thank you very much, and I believe that brings our panel up.
Just trying to make sure, see if we're going to catch up on the schedule. I'm Kirsten Ellenbogen. I'm president and CEO of Great Lakes Science Center. It's quite a privilege today to be moderating our panel from the ground up. And I was asked to explain a bit about why we're starting with this panel today. I think one of the best reasons as to why we're starting with a panel and a keynote speaker on education is that when I sat down this morning and read Crain's Cleveland and cleveland.com like I do in the morning, I realized that Crain's had missed the biggest economic development headline of the day because Emily Rabinovich was not in the headlines. There's a great piece about Akron and new museum coming, great stuff. Emily Rabinovich yesterday was the little girl from Solon, 15 years old, standing behind President Obama during his keynote at the White House Science Fair. Did you see her? Yeah. That's Northeast Ohio. And if you want to talk about economic development in this community, you've got to talk about the Emilys in our community. I promise you we will get into the details of what we're doing here and now to help technology startups and to move economic development ahead right now in the city. But this panel is an excellent recognition of the fact that unless you start with our next generation, unless you mobilize the urban core of Northeast Ohio, we won't go anywhere. We have an amazing panel today, and one of the things you'll hear the themes that Frank Sullivan already brought up for us. You'll hear us talk about authority, infrastructure, partnerships. You'll also hear a phrase, something we bat around a lot in this group because we talk about essentially from cradle to gray, lifelong learning, and we mean that both in terms of the age, the cradle to gray, but also in terms of life-wide. And what that means is that there's a lot of different organizations, there's a lot of different spaces and places where we support education in the community. It happens in schools, but it also happens in homes. It happens in churches, it happens in synagogues, it happens in mosques, it happens in the Boys and Girls Clubs, the Y, the out-of-school environments, our libraries. These are all places, right, where education is happening. And when you start to think about education as an ecosystem, not as just schools trying to do this on their own, because schools were never designed to be the only part of an educational function in a community. it was from the get-go and the foundation of what we think about as public schools today, there was this expectation of an ecosystem. We are mobilizing that ecosystem in Northeast Ohio. We've been designated one of only 27 communities in the United States by the National STEM Funders Network to be awarded this STEM ecosystem status. You can take a look at this at stemecosystems.org. We have our next meeting on May 12th, and we are going to end today with, in fact, a call to action, not just to get involved in this Northeast Ohio STEM ecosystem work, but how to get involved in a lot of the projects that our partners here are working on and that many of you here in the audience today are working on. So we will get to that, but let me start then by introducing this terrific panel. And I'm not quite in order, but I can do this. I'm going to switch to go in order here. Katie Grody-Good right here is Director of Technology Enhanced Learning at Breakthrough Schools. Breakthrough, which you'd better be familiar with, is the highest rated network of public charter schools in Cleveland, focusing on K-8 instruction. Next to her, we have Chelsea Cook, who's principal of Cleveland Metro Schools' John Marshall School of Information Technology. This is one of our preeminent CMSD schools with a focus on computer science. Next to her, we have Anthony Hughes. He is CEO and co-founder of TechniCLE, a provider of coding bootcamp instruction for Cleveland adults. Then we have Robert LaSalvia, my friend and partner over at NASA Glenn Research Center, and he is chief of the Office of Education there. We have Mel McGee. Mel is CEO of founder of We Can Code It, which provides education and mentorship in technology and engineering to historically underrepresented children and young adults in the area. And of course, we have Frank Sullivan, who is staying with us and who will chime in at times. But let's dive in to this and raise a few questions. I actually want to make sure we're touching on some of the things that you brought up, Frank, in terms of the Cleveland plan and the shifts in infrastructure and in some ways governance that's changing the way we do things here in education. And I know, Chelsea, that's certainly something that you can get us started off with.
Absolutely. I'm excited to be here today. First of all, I have to say that I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to speak to everyone. I don't always get to nerd out and talk about computer science, but I love doing so, and this is an opportunity in a room full of people who appreciate that. To dive in and speak specifically about the Cleveland plan, let me start by saying this. John Marshall IT, if you're not familiar, we are the first school in Northeast Ohio to focus on computer science, and that is something pretty amazing. Everyone in this room understands why that's important, but that would not have been possible without the Cleveland plan. I think that everyone here, I know we opened by saying that there's a lot of potential in Cleveland. What are the next steps? There's a lot of progress that can happen, and that is the Cleveland plan. If we're talking about education and all of our kids in Cleveland having access to a really strong system of public education, including computer science. That is the Cleveland plan. I think that the important thing to remember, if you're not familiar with the Cleveland plan at all, it's not the short game that we're looking at. The Cleveland plan has made progress, and it's cool to talk about that progress, but we're talking about next steps here. And in my perspective as a principal in the district, the Cleveland plan is the long game. And that's what we're all here for. I think that we're all, in my perspective, in terms of education, we're all trying to build this pipeline. If you want to look at what can differentiate Cleveland in the IT workforce, we need a stronger workforce. And there are a lot of folks here who are talking about bringing in young professionals. We're here, and I'm here to tell you about how we are doing some homegrown Clevelanders. We will provide that workforce. That's something important that we can continue growing, and that's why it's really great to be up with this whole panel, because we're all a part of that. And this ecosystem thing, it's creating a village. That's why we're all here, and the Cleveland plan will help us to do that.
So Katie, and I'm sure Chelsea, you have things to say on this. Tell us a little more then about how you change things structurally and from a pedagogical perspective and content perspective in your schools to make sure there's a computational science focus there.
So I'm with Breakthrough Schools. We're a K-8 network, public charter network here in Cleveland, highest performing in Cleveland. And we do it probably a little bit differently than what you see on paper and what you've heard. So we don't have the big blanket STEM or STEAM throughout our network. We are making an effort to do it a little bit more organically. We're making an effort to do it, implement and integrate technology as a piece of every lesson every day, not have it be this standalone entity where technology is taught in isolation and somehow we're supposed to make that connection for our students as to how that translates into the real world or how that translates into 21st century skills, 21st century jobs. We're taking the approach of working more with technology as an everyday component, that every lesson, regardless of content, has some thread of technology, and perhaps that comes in the form of a communication or collaboration within your small group, within your class, and maybe that comes in the form of something greater, much more fundamental as researching and using the internet and things of that nature to research. But we're not using it in the means of blanket and big bold words, kind of the hot button words. We're doing it, attempting to do it much more organically. And I'll put out there that, truthfully, we're just starting in on this adventure with integrating technology into our network because we're seeing this great digital divide among our students. And we're K-8. So I think there's often this thought process that goes along with elementary students that our kids can't quite do that yet. We shouldn't be having kindergartners, first graders writing on a blog or integrating technology into those lessons. Our teachers shouldn't be held to that expectation. And we're starting to do a pedagogical shift where that's an okay, and truthfully, that's an expectation as we move forward. So that's where we're starting. And for full disclosure, probably the best piece that we're doing, in my opinion, is we're documenting everything as we're going. So we're starting on this, and we're hoping that as we move forward, and we're doing some really cool stuff, even with our little Ks, our little kindergartners, all the way through our 8th graders are doing amazing things and preparing them for high school, for amazing high schools, right? But we're documenting all of it. And with that documentation comes the documentation of our epic fails, because our epic fails are what are teaching us how to do better, how to do more, how to integrate technology the right way. I think we often think, we have a lot of young teachers in our network, and we think our teachers come to us with, they know technology, which is totally true. But to teach with technology is a different skill set. So we're documenting how we go through that process of helping our teachers understand how to teach with technology. And with that comes kind of the good and the bad, and definitely the ugly. But hopefully the ugly makes out for better. So.
And I think there's a really important piece to differentiate here. For those of you who love education and for those of you who are not familiar, there's two different things we're really talking about. It is incorporating IT and technology into the classroom, and then there's this other world of exposing them to the world of computer science and making sure that they not only are consumers of technology, but they're also creators of technology. That is what's going to differentiate Cleveland. When our kids, when our kindergartners, and I know this is possible because I've seen it and it's really cool. If you ever want to break and you want to laugh and you want to have a good time, go to a kindergarten classroom and let them play with Scratch. And it's so fun, and you'll have a great time. Even if you don't like kids, they're doing computer science. It's funny and it's fun and it's really cool. But it's possible, and we need to do both sides. I love what Katie's saying about the digital divide, because we cannot forget those kids who live in Cleveland, and we cannot forget that we need to offer all students across the board an opportunity to use technology in their classrooms. And for those who aren't familiar with education, this is where it becomes difficult. Technology is expensive. Everybody in this room understands that. There is a big shift to even provide a kindergarten class with little robots or little iPads or whatever you want them to play with and create with. But that's a shift. And so I think as educators, we appreciate the patience in the room as we gain the capability to offer more technology, the patience it takes to really help our teachers and support our teachers through using that technology. And, and then on the other side, we want you to come at us and give us the mentorship, the support, the internships, everything in terms of that computer science world, because both are happening. We need some patience as we incorporate technology in the classroom. We do not need patience when you want us to have computer science. Our kids at John Marshall IT will be ready for an internship in 2 years. They will be ready for a paid internship in about 4 years. And in 10 years, our students at John Marshall IT will be the leaders and the new forming leaders in your companies. That's what we're looking for, those homegrown Clevelanders who can take on the leadership role and continue growing companies and be the entrepreneurs in Cleveland to make sure that we're the next hub of IT or health IT. If we have the Cleveland Clinic and the UH and all of this opportunity, we can be that. Let's find our niche and let's move in that direction, whatever it takes. But I think, again, it goes back to that it takes a village. We have a lot of teachers who are working very hard to make this happen, and that's not going to be enough. I think that partnership on both sides in terms of the public education and the business sector, all of you who are creating new companies, we want you to come into our schools. My kids need to speak to those of you who are doing this on a daily basis. And that inspiration will help me out a lot. It'll help my teachers out a lot. And it'll just be fun. Take a day off and come talk to my kids and come talk to the kids at Breakthrough, even if they're little bitty guys and little bitty girls that want to learn about this stuff. That's where we're going to make the difference.
So talk more about partnerships, right? So Robert and Mel, Frank got us started with terrific partnership examples. But I think from, when you think about K-12 partnerships, right? Robert and Mel, you can both speak to that.
Oh, yeah. It's funny because we talked about AT&T coming in the RNC. We're working with AT&T right now. John Marshall is one of our high schools in Cleveland Hack, so AT&T came on board and sponsored a hackathon for high school students. That's really meant to be inclusive. So we can code it as providing instruction. We're out in the community working with John Marshall has a group, Jane Addams, Shaw, and other schools as well. So I'm really excited about that. And as I look around this panel and around this room, I'm very excited to say that I think a lot of us work together, and that's very positive, right? And of course, we'd love to work with you. So, how do you feel about the partnerships going on? How is NASA able to work its way and work with all of the schools? I know that there's a hackathon coming up at NASA. We're really the Space App Challenge.
Yeah. So perhaps I'll start off by saying that I think many in the room are probably familiar with a very recent National Academy study that was released, and it was really focusing on the regional STEM ecosystem and how you improve it within the country. It's interesting in particular to Northeast Ohio because it actually used Cleveland as a case study, as we have some interesting advantages in manufacturing. So it was probably released about a month and a half ago. And so within this study, it's really difficult to talk about economic development without thinking about education and how education sort of feeds that future pipeline. And it pointed out something very interesting, I think something that folks on the panel, folks who work with schools every day, realize that although universities are right now producing students with STEM skills, they are often lacking what are called employability skills. These 21st century skills that you were referring to that are so essential to in the marketplace. So the ability to think creatively, to problem solve, to be tenacious in the face of adversity. The report actually suggested and actually referenced that these skills are often developed through considering different approaches in education. A real focus, for example, on ideas like project-based or problem-based learning. Giving these students experiences that look very much like the workforce, teaming with people perhaps you don't quite know well, being able to get up there and defend your work, advocate for a position, support your research. And so what we've really embraced for a long time at NASA is really focusing on these authentic experiences that lend themselves to project-based learning. We do a lot of work with universities. We do a whole lot of work in K through 12 as well. So I'll just cite 3 quick examples of things that we do that might be of interest or that we have found a bit of success with. The first is that for over 14 years now, we have been the primary sponsor in Northeast Ohio of something called the FIRST Robotics Competition. Mm-hmm. So FIRST is a national robotics competition involving thousands and thousands of schools across the U.S. We were one of the original hubs of this activity here in Northeast Ohio. And so what students do is they have 6 weeks to design a robot to complete a very complex task. This robot initially needs to operate in an autonomous mode, so coding is absolutely essential to the activity. And then the robot needs to perform often a series of incredible feats: climbing stairs, hanging on a bar, shooting balls into a basketball hoop. And so through this 6-week experience, students begin to develop these skills. A second example is a middle school opportunity that we've collaborated with now for about 4 years with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, and it's called Zero Robotics. So we have aboard the International Space Station, which is 250 miles straight up, staffed by astronauts all the time. We have these microsatellites, and we use these microsatellites for a variety of experiments. But what we do via Coding Challenge is we give students in middle school all across the country the opportunity to test a variety of codes that they might use to help these satellites complete a task. The students with the most innovative code actually get to test it using the satellites aboard the ISS. Very exciting opportunity. But it's real life. It's work that our scientists and engineers are pursuing every day, and we're giving middle school students that authentic experience.
I think that's really cool. I'd love to partner with you. We're partnering with a lot of schools in the area, going into schools, helping them teach computer science, because there's a problem. A lot of teachers don't know how to teach computer science, right? So we're trying to work on that. We have a lot of after-school collaborations as well. And, you know, another join is not just with education and organizations in the community, but also with employers. So we are located at StartMart. I'm in love with StartMart. It's a vibrant community where lots of entrepreneurs are there working together to share ideas, to cross-contaminate or pollinate, with each other, and figure out new innovative ways to do things, including education in our case. So I think, yeah.
And Mel, just to build on that, I think that in terms of next steps, if we're looking at next steps here and what that means in education, we need to connect all the dots. And when you talk about that ecosystem, connecting the dots with all of these wonderful organizations who are willing to come into schools and provide all these Clean Tech, the Space App Challenge, all of these things. We need more schools to have the opportunity to do that and feel supported in doing so, in bringing these after-school clubs. Right now we have NASA and Highland, and we can code it. So we're up to 3 days a week. We need the 5 days a week. Everybody can do this coding stuff after school. And in groups like the ecosystem and NeoSTEM and BioEnterprise, TechCore, RightBoard, these are all connectory groups that we need to work with more often just to make sure that we connect the dots. The K through 8 to the high school, to the university, to the graduate programs, to the businesses. We need a strong pipeline, and we all have to be a part of creating that connectivity, if you will.
So when you just talked about connectivity, I want to pull in Anthony here, right? Because one of the voices we're missing is then, what about the adult who's not in the graduate program, right? So how do we make sure that this is lifelong learning?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is such a great conversation, and if we think about, the spectrum of education, I sit on kind of the right side of this spectrum, and that's, I'm part of the Coding Bootcamp movement, which is really a movement that says that the skills that you have been equipped with, whether it's from high school if you graduated years ago or college if you graduated years ago, those don't have to be the skills that you use for the rest of your career. In fact, there are huge opportunities in the tech field, and we can reskill and upskill a large portion of the population to deal with the opportunities that are in the market right now. So the Coding Bootcamp movement has really grown from nothing since 2011 to last year we graduated about 16,000 students from our business model, which is really a sort of essentially what is a vocational model. We're an upskilling model. And in the case of Tech Elevator specifically, I love hearing about mentoring and the opportunities to tap into the community and have professionals come into schools and talk to students and inspire students and plant seeds, because that's something that we feel is critical in the model that we have as well. This notion that it takes a village. You know, we bring software developers in from our hiring partners. We have a network of over 70 hiring partners, and their software developers come in and they talk to our junior developers. This is what it's going to be like. These are the best practices. These are the habits. And we believe very strongly in that mentoring model. What's fascinating about technology and the field that we're in is around 70% of the people participating as software developers today in industry don't have any formal education. That's absolutely fascinating. Most people are self-taught or have been taught by companies. And so, you know, the formalization of this education is fantastic, but what we have as a group, a general profile of software developers, is these are just problem solvers. And you all know people who are great problem solvers. These are problem solvers who solve business problems with the use of technology. And so what we're trying to do is give these problem solvers in the community that don't have the technical experience, the technical credibility to compete for these wonderful jobs that are out there in the community. So it's great to hear this sort of continuum being displayed amongst the group here.
So I want to transition us, because you're already hearing this group talk about call to action, right? I think we could go on with all the things we want help with for quite a bit of time, but what we've done is we've put together a website, and if you look at your program, George and Mel masterminded this and put together right here, you see at right above our speakers, the wecancodeit.org, technically speaking. Take a look at that. We have already got some terrific ideas in there about what you can do to help. And I want to encourage you at this point to make sure, I'm watching for questions to pop up, and I haven't seen any yet. Tweet your questions or write your question on the card, because we're going to get into a few of these what could you actually do pieces. And then we're going to leave some time for additional questions, because this is such a terrific group. So let me transition into that. And really, Mel, if you want to start by talking a bit about what you put together on the website, we can begin with that.
Got to thank George for the content. And yeah, we put together, there's a form here. We invite you to fill it out if you are interested in keeping in touch with the educators, the tech educators in Cleveland. That will help us know who you are, know that you want to be involved, because I know that sometimes that's half the battle. So it's this form here, and if you scroll down, you'll see all of the organizations, tech organizations in Cleveland here. You can click on any of the links. It will go to their site. After that, we have volunteer opportunities and opportunities to give in other ways as well. So we have opportunities to help out, very specific opportunities going on here. So I welcome you, I encourage you to take the momentum from today and go look through this. Find out where you can be of most use. And down at the bottom, we have some treasure requests. So I think there's a lot of requests for computers, support, and just joining on a mission to help schools in the area get what they need to make Cleveland a great technical city.
So let's flesh out just a couple of these before we move into questions, and please do write those on cards, or we can have a roving microphone come around to you. If someone wants to mentor, right, what does that look like? Can someone give examples from your institution? What does that feel like? How do you participate as a mentor? What's the kind of commitment you need to make?
Okay, so I know Anthony has I think all of us do. From We Can Code It, we also have a coding boot camp. It's been going on for over a year now, and we love mentors to come in. Have a cup of coffee. Help new junior developers navigate their way through the tech industry in Cleveland. Welcome them on board. That's just one of the ways you can mentor with us. I don't want to.
I think it can be as simple as you'd like it to be. If you had 10 minutes, I would find you a place to speak to our kids at John Marshall IT or any other Cleveland school. Take your pick and we will find a place. I think that that's probably true for Breakthrough as well, but there are a wide variety of opportunities. You can come speak, you can be a weekly mentor, you can be a monthly mentor, you can come, how often you want, and you can talk to as many kids as you'd like. I think that another component of that is really having the organization behind it. If you want to get specific, you don't just have to mentor talk to them. You can help them play around on whatever platform they're using. We use Alice with computer science principles. We can do Java, we can do Python, whatever language you want. We'll find you some kids who want to play around in that language with you. And if you're not sure about what that looks like, again, there are organizations to help you through that. We Can Code It is in our schools right now. TechniCLE is a really strong partner in terms of making sure that our NASA partners coming in understand how to set up a lesson, how to get through everything. So there are endless opportunities. You imagine it and we'll make it happen.
So I want to jump in and just say, so we've mentioned TechniCLE a couple times. Lisa Chambers is here, so if anybody would like to talk to her afterwards, Lisa, would you put your hand up?
You should wait.
There you
Yeah,
go. The other thing I'd say is, I would guess, just looking at this audience, that the majority of people here don't know how to write a line of code, and that's absolutely fine. Look, what we're trying to do is help people understand, and particularly young kids, to understand that we're going through what essentially compromises a fourth industrial revolution. There are 2.5 billion smartphones on the planet, billions of interconnected devices, and there is a form of literacy that involves being able to give machines instructions that the vast majority of us don't possess. And if we can inspire kids and young adults to adopt that literacy, they're opening up an enormous world of opportunity. You don't have to write code to plant that seed that will germinate in these students to understand that that exploration, if fostered, will lead to a wonderful future and a wonderful career. We have a meetup group called Learn to Code. We invite people to just join. We host free events, and that's a great thing to do. We're hosting a hackathon on the line of the space apps, but we're hosting a hackathon with the Cleveland Indians to take a subject, a baseball that people are passionate about. We're doing a hackathon with the Cleveland Indians and Progressive Insurance called Tribe Hackathon, where we're inviting people to build cool, creative apps to enhance the fan experience. It's about finding ways for people to connect with technology and understand the role that technology can play in their life. And it's when you can seed that passion that the rest of things will take care of themselves. That journey, that momentum will start building.
So we've got a couple questions that have come forward already, and I want to transition into those. And certainly, if you prefer to raise your hand, I can catch you that way. But let me start with this one. Do we have a question already? If you wanted to step up to the mic, we're happy to take you first. All right. So, all right, there was Robert, there's a request for you to talk a little more about the National Academy report. Give more details, share where people can find that, a little bit more on that.
Yeah, perhaps what we can do is maybe post a link or on the website you shared, or maybe we put it up on Twitter. But yeah, but essentially, a lot of it really does focus on sort of building.
We need the title.
The title, I wrote it down.
This is the Eric Jolly one?
Yeah, pardon me?
The National Academies of Science. It was chaired by Eric Jolly, and it's called?
It's I believe it's like the Regional STEM Workforce Ecosystem is the title. But it was chaired. Yeah, right. Yeah,
We'll get a link out.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. What was the discussion about Cleveland in that?
Well, it did a case study on 5 or 6 different cities, and it just spoke a bit about some of the successes that you're seeing in Cleveland, some of the operations that we use, and it sort of found commonalities across all the cities. So, I mean, there was some real benefit in sort of public-private partnership and other things that they pointed out.
All right. We've had some examples of what do we mean by computer science, what do we mean by preparing for the future of IT. and even some examples that it's not necessarily coding, and some examples that it can be organic. But I think there's a real interest. We're getting questions on what specifically is John Marshall's curriculum, and how is it different?
Absolutely. I could talk about this all day, so if you want to get more information, I'll be on the sidelines. But we are starting with something called Bootstrap for our freshmen. It is incorporated into algebra, and essentially they build a video game. Next year, we're hoping to put together a video game fair instead of a science fair, just as fun, with our sophomores. So our 10th graders, they're going to be doing Exploring Computer Science. It's a lot of informational text, but that's the why behind all of this here. They have to understand, why is computer science such a big deal right now? They're just kids, so they don't understand that Cleveland is in the running to be the next big dog in this big data sector, this health IT or computer science. They need to understand that and why Cleveland's important. The next piece is computer science principles. They focus on computational thinking, and there's been a paradigm shift in computer science education. If you want to look into it, check out CSP or AP, Advanced Placement CSP. And computer science is more of the computational thinking. We all know in this room, or most of us know, that the languages change often, and the language that kind of dominates will change every 5 years, every 10 years. By the time my kids get into your companies, it might be a different language on top, but we start with computational thinking so that they understand the basic concepts, all of that first. Then, once they move into their junior, senior year, they actually choose a pathway. Right now, we have really strong partners, Cleveland State University with software development, John Carroll University with health IT specifically, and Tri-C Community College with cybersecurity, CCNA, Cisco Certified Network Administrator, and potentially a medical records piece. All of those can lead up to Kent's new graduate program with information systems technology, I believe. But it's again building that pipeline. In their senior year, if they love it, they'll do AP Computer Science with Java and build a portfolio of a language. Many of you who would want to interview kids for an internship, they need to show you something, and that's where they bring in, I've done this with this language. Through all of that, we're teaching the process of Agile, and I don't know, how many of you are familiar with Agile processing? Thank you. Oh my God, I love being here.
It's the right crowd.
So we're teaching them Agile as we go through this, about their personal Scrum and how to work with a team and a Scrum Master and all of that. So we're very excited. If you want to hear more, I'd love to talk to any of you about that.
So one of the other questions that came up, I actually want to pull Frank Sullivan back in for this. One of the questions tweeted is about ensuring excellence in the people we're hiring. Given this conversation and everything you know about working with John Marshall, how do we really make sure that we're instilling excellence in this workforce?
I think as it relates to the schools, having private sector players involved in governance and involved in the interviewing process in terms of the principals makes a big difference in principal selection and leadership in the schools. As it relates to creating the workforce of the future here, I agree with everything that's been said up here. I can tell you the fundamental reason that we started talking about the Cleveland School of Science and Medicine was the recognition that in the United States in general, and in Cleveland in particular, manufacturing was going like this, and everything about science and medicine was going like that. And we had a lot of debates, even with folks like Toby Cosgrove and Tom Zenti. Early arguments were there is no such thing as a pre-med high school. And this was medicine big. It's for nursing, it's for medical technicians, it's for pharmaceutical sales. It's basically to be mission-driven and expose our students to those opportunities and those industries and those careers that are growing. And in medicine, you have and you will find, just like in technology, the jobs, broadly speaking, that will replace the multi-dollar per hour, great benefit manufacturing jobs that are gone and are never coming back. And so I do think that one of the ways that these schools will be successful and will better successfully educate our kids, and this is a little bit a new thinking, but you're hearing it here, is that I think schools, and in particular high schools, need to be somewhat theme or mission driven. And the schools that are drifting are the schools that are following kind of an old line curriculum. They're not partnering with anybody, and they're missing that enthusiasm, both that enthusiasm of the public-private partnership benefits that we're talking about, and that enthusiasm of what's happening in the world around them.
That's a great point. I do want to say thanks. We've already got the URL for the Building Regional STEM Workforce Report out there if you're following TechniCLE on Twitter, and as well as the warning that it's not exactly mobile friendly, that website. But do go to that, and we will make sure we get that link out also onto the website itself. I've got two more questions, and I want to see is there anyone else who wants to come up to the microphone? All right, the first one is to recognize that this is a room full of educational ecosystem, right? Our corporate partners, the startups, we are in this together, right? This is what the ecosystem means. But we've got a number of education leaders here. We've already called out TechniCLE. We have our Cleveland Public Libraries here. And we also have here the consortium. There's a consortium of African-American organizations with a program called the Youth Innovation Forum. They're specifically looking for partnerships with other organizations that work with youth. So what we're going to do, and do you want to wave so people can find you? So what we're going to do is get all those details up onto the website so that we can really keep those connections going. So I want to end with a terrific question, as always, from Charles Stack that says, what would be a good Cleveland STEM goal for 2017? And I'll take any response on the panel on that.
Computer science for all.
Computer science for all.
You
Right,
can look at Twitter. The hashtag will explain it.
Oh,
No? Oh.
oh,
the
a
number
goal.
of
No,
people.
he's like an educator. He knows. An evaluator. A goal needs a number. It needs to be measurable.
Every school in the Cleveland city limits needs to offer computer science in some way by year 2017.
Love that.
Yes? All right. What else could be a possible goal for 2017?
17.
Measurable goal.
I don't think that's bound by that's not just high school
Right.
oriented. We have to be
Right.
thinking more, in broader terms of computer science and instilling those basic skills so that you can build on them for the next level.
Yeah, give every student a computer science experience. I think there's a lot of positive momentum around sort of the hour of code stuff that was going on earlier in the year.
I want Anthony and I to push some really wonderful software engineers out there. Let's say, what do you want? 400, 500 this year, and 1,000 next year?
I'm going to ratchet that one down. My CFO would kick me in the pants. I think we're going to graduate about 200 software developers from our program next year. And that's going to be hard work to do, but we're going to do it.
We're headed for 200 this year. We're hoping to increase it again next year. So between the two of us, we're bringing a lot of new computer scientists into the workforce.
It's all about, especially for the measurable piece over here, and I appreciate that. I know BioEnterprise is working on kind of a comprehensive report to show people what it can look like to connect the dots across the board, K through 12, and then all the way to the universities in the corporate world. What if by 2017, the summer of 2017, let's say, we have at least 3 individualized pipelines with new school partners and new school pathways. That would be, and it's only 3. I mean, come on, that's totally doable. So something like that would affect a lot of people in the room. Maybe.
Well, we're going to be making these goals with you. I hope you continue to join us in conversation on the Twitter feed, in the hallways, and online in this follow-up conversation that'll be happening on the website. Please join me in welcoming and thanking our terrific panel.